Hi, and thank you for listening. My name is Grith Tschorn, and together with Johnny Rasmussen, I have founded the Gifted Institute here in Denmark. Together with more than 50 colleagues, we work with giftedness, twice exceptionals and multi-exceptionals, both children, adolescents, and adults. For me, it's my passion and hobby, and it's also my work. A 13-year-old boy said to me at one point in the middle of the assessment, "Grith, you are simply so excited about my answers that I just want to give you even more." And that is in fact an expression of the holistic approach in action. I am a mother, a wife, daughter, sister, aunt, and I'm a gifted specialist. In the beginning, I worked on a hobby level and then professionally. I've worked with giftedness for more than 26 years. I work with the aim of creating a deeper understanding in the field of giftedness and all the joys and challenges that come with it, thereby creating better conditions for gifted children, adolescents, adults, and their families. I spend a large part of my working life with assessment of children, adolescents, and adults, and it is a privilege, it's a true privilege to get to know so many amazing people. I approach every testing situation and therapy session with gratitude and humility for the trust shown by the people I meet at the Institute. As a generalized target group, gifted people have an intensity and complexity that requires a deep understanding. It requires empathy and authenticity if one wants to have any hope of a client letting you in. The holistic approach is in our eyes a necessity when one wants to create an understanding and recognition of asynchrony, complexity, intensity, high intellectual capacity, and at the same time, perhaps also an understanding and recognition of something that goes beyond this. First, I would like to take you 26 years back in time. Back then in Denmark, it was called, roughly translated, children with special capacities. And if you ask a parent, they will always say, my child is a good soccer player, yes, capacities. My child is a good chess player, that's a capacity. And some parents are maybe only capable of saying, my child is very good at eating with a knife and a fork, that's his capacity. So we were a handful of energetic and determined women who first chose to establish a group with Mensa. And 6 years later, we established ourselves as an independent association. So those who are mathematically strong, you might have probably already calculated from my story that the association is turning 20 this year. And we decided to call it Gifted Children. Why was there a force bringing me this far? Well, our oldest son, who's now 30 years old, and back to math again, he was only 4 years old and actually functioning well, except when he beat up the other kids in kindergarten because he was frustrated by their lack of understanding that dinosaurs should not be arranged in color and size order, but in age. So back to gifted children. When one has enthusiasm and a desire to act, it doesn't take much more before you suddenly find yourself in a situation where you take leadership, and I ended up being chairman for the organization for more than 12 years. During that time, there was a massive increase of members, and we brought giftedness to the agenda and, among other things, also found ambassadors who had courage, desire, and definitely also a recognition of their own upbringing and schooling. In the years that went into shaping society, and in particular myself, in terms of the need to look holistically at this entire large, fantastic group of children, adolescents, adults, and their parents, stories were often about dissatisfaction and, not least, misunderstandings. Why can't gifted deliver on command? Why can't they recite this Cyrillic alphabet in their sleep and solve the challenges of microplastics in the oceans? Why doesn't a simple formula resonate with the child that can simply be cracked with an even simpler code? The answer is most probably giftedness is just as complex as the wildest codes. And yet, if one had the key or the code to the lock, one could get pretty far. Why is he bad-tempered? Why is she demand avoidant? There are as many challenges and mysteries as there are keys. When I discovered that I was pretty good at cracking codes and had a massive key ring with room for even more keys, well, I decided to go all in on this project with one goal in mind: to change the world for gifted children, adolescents, and adults. Because how hard can that be? One of the milestones was meeting Linda Silverman, who has established the Gifted Development Center in Colorado in the United States. She also works holistically, and together we have a common mission where we try to create responsiveness so that those around us get the right understanding and insight in the encounter with gifted individuals, and in particular also in the encounter with gifted individuals who struggle with all kinds of challenges. And we also work in particular to uncover the challenges so that it is actually the right thing to address in order to avoid treating symptoms and instead tackle the root of the problem gently, kind, with love, and with the deepest respect for the trust that is given to us. In the holistic work, Linda Silverman introduced me to a nonverbal testing tool called the World Game. Linda's greatest wish was that I specialize in the use of this tool. At first, I thought she must have lost her mind. However, as I went deeper into this tool, it wasn't long before I was engulfed by its possibilities and went all in and immersed myself even more and got even more into numbers and details, most probably recognizable to others. It took me some time to gain an understanding of the World Game, and the eye-opener was when I had a girl for assessment who, together with her family, was in an extremely fragile and terrible situation as the authorities were considering removing her from her parents. The parents insisted on their child being gifted, and the authorities claimed the parents were just pacing her. She had been tested in psychiatry with an average IQ and then came to me at the Institute for assessment with the World Game. World Game showed giftedness, and at the same time, it also showed that she was severely challenged by her neurooptic. After a year and a half of training with vision training, she went through a new WISC with a result in the 99.9 percentile. And not very long ago, she also came to the Gifted Institute, where she also scored in the 99.9 percentile in reasoning. So, what is the point of the holistic approach? Well, we usually say authenticity and a 360-degree picture. We want to visit the whole plate. And to us, visiting the whole plate, that is authenticity, qualitative and quantitative, observations and measurements, inner life and data, rapport building, good time and a good atmosphere, meaningful and positive framework, observe and listen. Listen to the child and to the parents. Parents actually know their children pretty well when it comes down to it. They often think they don't know their child well enough, but they do. Show trust and confidence towards the child and the parents. Why is it necessary? Why can't the gifted just get their act together? Well, hyperintensity, overactivation, overexcitability. Observation is the key to success. And why is it important to create an environment where the person who comes for assessment is actually up for it? Well, the intensities can be misunderstood. And how can they do that? Well, how does it relate to the holistic approach? Well, a central element of the holistic approach is to look at the intensities, the overexcitabilities. Intense, heightened responses to stimuli, characterized by heightened sensitivity, the awareness in various domains, including intellectual, emotional, sensory, imaginational, and psychomotor areas. A new cross-cultural study with American and Belgian children recently confirmed that there is a significant correlation between the size of the giftedness and the occurrence of overexcitabilities. In the conclusion of the research article, the researchers wrote, among other things, that they recommend that screening for overexcitabilities should be introduced in early kindergarten age, as well as in pediatricians and psychiatrists who see young children, as the occurrence of 3 or more overexcitabilities might be an indication that it may be relevant to look with curiosity at the child's intelligence. In all the years that I have tested gifted children and gifted adolescents and gifted adults, I have uncovered overexcitabilities as part of the holistic screening. These intensities, they have a clear meaning and impact on the individual, and if you think the child reacts emotionally intense, then you may be tempted to think that it is in this intense universe that the child should be met, and also here the challenges should be addressed. But what if, just what if, the emotional reactions are triggered by something completely different? Then we are once again treating a symptom without uncovering the cause. So, about a year ago, I attended a training course with Michael Pikowski. Pikowski was the right hand of the Polish researcher Dabrowski, who was the first to describe the concept of overexcitability, and Pikowski has continued Dabrowski's work. Being in the company of a grandmaster in this field, and at the same time being taught by not only Michael but also Linda Silverman, made this a quite unique learning session. Fun fact, Dabrowski was one of the first to describe the concept of nervousness, and later it was actually a Dane, Søren Kierkegaard himself, who described the concept of anxiety. If we then look at the holistic in its whole, curiosity, genuine curiosity, it is central and another key, so to speak. Curiosity should be celebrated and seen as the key to getting all the way around and getting all the details. Most things should basically be seen from at least 2 sides. Self-esteem and self-confidence. Nervousness versus anxiety. Melancholy versus depression. Temperament versus anger. Provocation and boldness versus norm-breaking behavior. Being busy versus stress. Reasoning, reflection, perfectionism, and not at least humor. I experience that asynchrony amongst gifted people is often mistakenly confused with immaturity. We must remember that it is about intensity, and the higher the giftedness, the greater the intensity. I experience stories that working memory should be trained. We must remember that it is about vulnerabilities, and they do not necessarily benefit from reminders of what is difficult. I find that it is recommended that the children should be sent on a resilience course. We must remember that it is all about reflection, and then you can choose to go down the positive path instead of the negative path. I would like to give a small conclusion to everything I have said. A classic test situation where giftedness is suspected will often include a whipsy, a whisk, or a ways. A gifted child comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes and will not initially think it's so cool to be tested. So if the child is first met with something that seems clinical, impersonal, rigid, or even insincere, lacking interest, empathy, and connection, well, then I may not exactly think we are getting a fair test result. To the gifted, there are some areas of particular importance. It is always about being extremely authentic and then showing sufficient care for the individual, combined with also allowing the child to gain insight into the emotions of the adult. With a holistic approach for the child or adult, the abilities and motivation will increase significantly, both in terms of performance and interaction, and thus provide a more complete insight into the resources, because those are exactly the resources we want to see and not a deficit. Without authenticity, We lose the depth we get by investing in the people who come to the Institute. Giftedness comes, as I said, in all shapes and sizes, with everything from self-criticism to self-destruction, and therefore we know that uncovering the inner life of children and adults, it means everything in order to understand why most of us mask and camouflage throughout most of our lives. Many adults only receive help to discover and acknowledge their own giftedness when they have children of their own, having the opportunity to revisit patterns in their own upbringing and education. And why? Why is it so important to know if you are highly gifted? Well, as a starting point, it can give you a better understanding of which direction the compass needle is pointing. It can also give us insight into hidden potential that you might not necessarily want to challenge because your own story may be misunderstood or even neglected. When we have drawn a 360-degree picture of the person who comes here, it will be much easier to help that person become part of a bigger picture, the community. All people basically want to be part of something. All people need to feel useful. Gifted people need to see the meaning, feel included and involved. And the last one is probably one of the most important approaches. When you are involved, the likelihood of taking responsibility and feeling like you have a stake in your own life increases. Becoming a participant in life instead of a spectator. That is exactly the part we feel obligated to pass on at the Institute. The understanding of what we do to the world and what the world is doing to us. The holistic approach helps to focus on how it is most useful in order to be useful and how to approach it in a right manner. Both by taking responsibility and at the same time asking others to take responsibility when you discover you're not being fully equipped to address these things. The holistic approach helps to focus on the fact that everyone deserves to be understood and loved for who they are. By focusing on what we deserve and what others deserve. Thank you so much for listening.